On December 23rd, in 1888, Vincent van Gogh cut off a part of his ear with a razor, wrapped it into a piece of paper, and delivered the package to a cleaning girl in a nearby brothel. Leading up to this incident, Van Gogh's life was paved with hardships, self-induced problems, and a mental illness that ultimately became his downfall. He was an intelligent, well-read, yet complicated man with a demeanor that irritated everyone around him, even those who tried to support him. And although he never had any money to speak of, Vincent van Gogh created hundreds of paintings and illustrations that to this day inspire millions of people. The extraordinary incident that all the letters he wrote to his brother Theo survived almost 2 centuries allows us to relive Vincent's struggles. They make us feel bad for him whenever he had a setback, or they make us cry out of frustration because of yet another foolishness he committed. While I tell you the peculiar things he did, I create an artwork inspired by his wonderful paintings. And I invite you to paint along with me in a step-by-step tutorial, which you can find on my Patreon page. If you always wanted to paint even a little bit like Van Gogh, this is for you, even if you are a total beginner. And if you are into collecting this artwork as a fine art postcard, you also want to check out my Patreon page for a monthly postcard and sticker set. This is also a great way to support this channel and these types of videos. Just have a look at the video description where you can find a link to my Patreon page. Opposing common social norms and conventions to the point that he stopped taking care of himself, Van Gogh never fitted in anywhere. No one could endure him for an extended amount of time due to his unpredicted mood changes and strange behaviors. He wore old worn-down clothes, and due to malnutrition, he had loose teeth. Maybe this behavior was rooted in his childhood when he was born in 1853 in a small village in the Netherlands. Growing up in a very religious and rigid household, he felt his youth was an austere, cold and sterile place. In 1869, when Vincent was 16 years old, he began his apprenticeship in his uncle's art-dealing business, Goupil and Son. He had his first experience with fine art there, which ingrained in him his passion for painting. However, the first event that indicated that he was unlike most people happened when he turned 20 and fell in love for the first time. Unfortunately, though, for Vincent, the girl named Eugenie wasn't interested in him. She was already engaged to somebody else and harshly rejected Vincent's advances. But instead of getting over the rejection and moving on, the experience plunged Vincent into a depression, which changed his attitude entirely. From being quite open-minded and pleasant, he turned into an irritable and taciturn person. Preferring reading the Bible to human contact, he started to neglect his work, and with only 22, he quit his job altogether, ending his promising career. Van Gogh became thoroughly caught up in the role of a preacher. In the following years, he tried to indulge in his career as a man of faith. But every single course, job or program he undertook, 6 in total, he failed. His final attempt was a post as a missionary. He despised the bourgeoisie because he felt it was cold and dishonest. Instead, he romanticized the lower classes, and to support them, he decided to live as a homeless person in a small hut where he slept on straw. Unsurprisingly, this got him fired. When he walked 75 kilometers to Brussels on foot, his parents finally lost it and tried to send him to a lunatic asylum, but didn't succeed. After all these years, Van Gogh missed the old days in the art-dealing business, where he was surrounded by beautiful paintings and reproductions, which he passionately collected. So, at 33 years old, the wish to become an artist finally emerged in him. And although he started painting late in his life, he nevertheless managed to produce over 2,000 paintings, and most of his art, almost 900 paintings and illustrations, he created in the last 2 years of his life. Unlike his parents, his brother Theo always believed in him and encouraged him to take up art seriously, He organized this day with their cousin Anton Mauve, who was a professional artist. But of course, Van Gogh got into a fight with them as well, destroying plaster casts that Mauve gifted him because Vincent wanted to paint from life models instead. In the meantime, he also had taken in an ill prostitute with her kids, which estranged him from his family and friends furthermore. Relocations to Nouenen and Antwerp followed, where he lived in poverty, smoked and drank heavily. Van Gogh wasn't unintelligent, he knew he was a disappointment, and he often felt like a loser. In 1886, with 34 years old, he decided it was time for a change, and he moved to Paris, the capital of art. Vincent wanted to look appropriate for the city life, so he got his teeth done and took care of his appearance again before arriving in Paris, where he surprised his brother with a visit. Theo already lived and worked there as a successful art dealer, and he was kind enough to take Vincent in. From then on, an exciting time for Vincent started, in which he visited numerous exhibitions, discovered new art styles, and made lots of friends. There were plenty of misfits like him in Paris, unsuccessful yet talented artists that didn't fit into society. And he finally felt understood. In addition, his brother Theo admired him for his ability to make new friends and connections, so Vincent felt accepted on numerous levels. Although Theo was frustrated by Vincent's constant mood changes, the time they spent together created a caring and loving relationship between them that lasted until the end of their lives. Theo always supported Vincent's ideas and sent him money each month, thus ensuring that he could continue his art career. At that time in Paris, Impressionist painters like Claude Monet slowly gained recognition. Still, most artists with alternative art styles, such as Gauguin, Cézanne, and Seurat, were made fun of by the elite and the artists that were allowed to show in the yearly Salon de Paris. Until late 1800, academic and historicistic art were the only two art styles approved by art collectors, critics, and the majority of society. If you did something else, you had no perspective to make any money off your art. Hence, Van Gogh couldn't sell any of his artworks, even though he had his first exhibitions in Paris. In Paris, Van Gogh was exposed to lots of Japanese art. Like many of his peers, he was profoundly inspired by the exotic patterns he saw on kimonos and Japanese woodblock prints, and how they composed large areas of plain colors. Van Gogh created several copies of his favorite pieces. His apartment was only a couple of steps away from the famous gallery of Samuel Bing. There, he browsed and collected numerous ukiyo-e prints that fueled his inspiration. And then, a dream slowly manifested in Van Gogh: to move to Japan and find the real subjects of the Japanese masters he admired so much. But he had no money for a journey, so he made the best out of his situation and settled for the near south, the French Provence. So, in 1888, after 2 years in Paris, Van Gogh struck out to Arles. The south was the manifestation of an idea for him: light and vivid colors, harsh contours, and sumptuous landscapes made of large plain areas, excellent for plein air painting. Enchanted by the countryside, his works from this period are rich in yellow, ultramarine, and mauve. Van Gogh always dreamt of an artist colony, and he believed he finally found the place for it in Arles. So, in numerous letters, he tried to convince his artist friend, Paul Gauguin, to visit and work with him in his yellow house, where he had set up a modest studio. Surprisingly, Gauguin promised to come. But in reality, he only committed because of a financial arrangement with Theo, which granted him a monthly allowance, but he had to live and work with Vincent in return. And although Gauguin appreciated Van Gogh's works, he saw him more as an annoyance than anything else and thought a residence in the rural countryside was beneath him. Van Gogh, however, was excited for his friend to arrive. and he began his elaborate décoration to prepare the yellow house for the arrival of his friend, probably the most ambitious effort he ever undertook. This phase of Van Gogh's life is considered his artistic breakthrough, in which he created some of his most famous paintings, the Sunflower series. While he worked, his idea to decorate the house transformed and grew into a final body of work culminating in 30 paintings. While Vincent was excited and thrilled, Gauguin felt the opposite. In his eyes, the yellow house was an embarrassing place, and he despised the ruralism of the Provence. Paul dreamt of real exotic places, like the tropics. And on top of that, the two of them had often heated discussions about art and technique, which unnerved Gauguin so much that he quickly had enough of Vincent. After mentioning that he might leave at some point, Van Gogh panicked and he started to stalk his friend to ensure he didn't secretly leave him. He followed him around at every step, and at one time in the middle of the night, he burst into Paul's room to see if he was still there. Obviously, this behavior didn't help the situation at all, and the worst soon happened when, at one night, Gauguin decided to leave the house without telling Vincent. Vincent then suffered a mental breakdown in his room. He heard voices and, in his rage, he cut off a part of his ear, wrapped it into a piece of paper, and went with it to the brothel to hand it to a cleaning lady. Later, he couldn't recall anything he did that night. But Gauguin had already left for good, and the two of them never saw each other again. That Gauguin left shattered Van Gogh's dream of an art colony, and in his letters to Theo, he resigned and said he didn't have any more strength to find happiness. He continued to work in Arles, but his mental health deteriorated to the point that locals signed a petition to institutionalize him. Not wanting to cause any more troubles, he left for the mental institution in Saint-Rémy. It was tough for Van Gogh to live under the mentally ill. The food was horrible, it had cockroaches in it, and the institution was mainly a place to lock the mentally ill behind bars. Fortunately, Vincent was soon allowed to go out and paint in the gardens around the building. He created his most famous paintings, The Starry Night and Cypresses in Saint-Rémy. Van Gogh was fascinated by the cypresses and wanted to make a series out of them. He was surprised no other artist had discovered their beauty yet and painted them like he did, with curly shapes and swirls. While Vincent was at Saint-Rémy, Theo had married Jo, who was expecting a son, and they decided to name him Vincent too. But Vincent van Gogh strongly opposed that idea. He was terrified that another Vincent would become more important to Theo than he was. So he started to have mental breakdowns again, during which he tried to swallow toxic pains, and they had to take them away from him. He didn't dare to go out alone for weeks after these incidents. Because Vincent wanted to leave the institution, where he felt like a prisoner, Theo organized an arrangement with a patron who could provide an apartment for him. So, in 1890, Vincent left Saint-Rémy to meet Dr. Gachet in Auvers. After the meeting, Van Gogh described him as very eccentric and thought that he might not be the best influence on him. Unfortunately, that turned out to be true, because after only a couple of appointments with Van Gogh, Dr. Gachet declared him as healed. So, Van Gogh didn't receive any treatment, nor was he monitored by personnel in case he had another mental breakdown. And soon enough, the tragedy happened. Theo, who was in financial strains at that time, wanted to start his own art dealing business with a couple of associates, including Vincent, who would be a part of the firm. This would finally relieve him of financial worries for good. When they all met up with a potential investor, the meeting unfortunately didn't go as planned, and the investment fell through. Vincent was incredibly disappointed and left the same day. The next day, the 27th of July in 1890, Vincent went into the nearby wheat fields, where he took his pistol and shot himself in the stomach. There are many speculations about why he did it. The most common one is that Vincent was devastated that his brother, in his eyes, decided against him. Since Theo was in financial trouble, he wouldn't be able to support Vincent anymore, and Van Gogh believed that his career as an artist was finally over. However, against all odds, he survived the suicide attempt and, badly injured, made it to a guest house. The guest house owners quickly called a physician, but he couldn't come, so they called for Dr. Gachet. Dr. Gachet, believing there was no help for Van Gogh, left soon after he arrived. So Vincent ended up not receiving any medical treatment for his injuries. When his brother received the note from the guest house owner a day later, he rushed to visit Vincent, who in the meantime had suffered from a wound infection. And at the same day, the 29th of July in 1890, Vincent van Gogh passed away. After Vincent's death, Theo's health too deteriorated. He had been ill for quite some time, and his health began to decline further after his brother's death. Weak and unable to come to terms with Vincent's absence, he died 1 year later in 1891. Now, we can't speak about Vincent van Gogh without mentioning his sister-in-law, Johanna van Gogh Bonga, who was probably the sole reason why Vincent van Gogh is now one of the famous, if not the most famous artist in the world. Jo, a young woman in her 20s who had not known either her husband or her brother-in-law for very long, suddenly had to take care of several hundreds then valueless paintings, letters and drawings, as well as her infant son. Although advised to dispose of the pictures, she instead moved back to the Netherlands and began to re-establish her artistic contacts. In the following decades, she translated and published hundreds of letters Vincent wrote, and with the help of art dealer Paul Casseret, organized numerous successful solo exhibitions with Van Gogh's paintings. Although harshly criticized, she didn't stop. And due to her diligence and the publications of the letters, the compelling mystique of Vincent van Gogh's life, the intense and dedicated painter who suffered for his art and died young, spread throughout Europe and the rest of the world. Today, we know almost every detail and personal aspect of Van Gogh's life only because he wrote hundreds of letters to his brother Theo, who carefully collected them. Van Gogh's letters are extraordinary and often read like novels. Over the years, he developed a unique literary style, influenced by the literature he read and authors he admired, like Charles Dickens and John Keats. And only because of his passion for reading and writing, today we have this extraordinary view into the art world at that time and the deep personal insights of an historical figure. Poet W.H. Auden wrote about the letters, "There is scarcely one letter by Van Gogh which I do not find fascinating." I wholeheartedly agree with that. I got thoroughly lost in Van Gogh's world during my research, and I enjoyed reading his thoughts and opinions very much. His biggest dream was to found an artist colony, the Atelier du Midi, a place where artists inspire and support each other, and living fully independently. I loved that idea, so I named my painting after that. And this is the final painting, by the way. And maybe you have already noticed during the video that I merged several of Van Gogh's paintings with my own style to create this sort of hybrid painting. Now let me know, do you think it worked? And do you like the painting? Tell me in the comment section. And with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to give it a like, and I see you in the next one.